In one word, why are we speaking of me today? Because I have lifted a taboo and I dared say that a woman could become bishop, even archbishop. And that is a first. There was a commonly held opinion that made believe that this position was restricted to men only. And I thought, a woman archbishop, why not?
Yeah, but I mean, it's like a step change. You've gone for really one of the top jobs there, when women can't yet become priests within the Catholic Church. So, tell us why you made that strategic move to just go, well, actually, let's go for the archbishopric rather than...
To apply, because I consider myself qualified. I simply think I am competent, and I cannot stand the split, the gap between the situation given to of women in society and the situation or condition of women in the church. I cannot bear this split anymore and would like to unite and restore the unity within my person, between my role in society and my role in church. That is why I decided to apply without any apprehension, any guilt, any fear. I was working towards restoring my own unity. It is something that has only brought me joy and has not gave me any sense of guilt. It has simply given me the joy to be nothing but a united person between the societal role and role that I hold within the church.
Well, this cleavage, is there partout. It's across the Catholic Church in as much as, women who are well able to hold down professional, responsible jobs, not only in the counseling environment, but in law, in psychology, in education, in hospitals, in business, are not able at the moment to even be priests. So does your argument there run back into the priesthood, and how do you think the church can sort this?
No, I do not wish to become a priest. I consider that the ordained ministry is currently undergoing a crisis, and I believe that it serves no purpose to add a few women among the priests that currently exercise. That would only mean adding more nothingness to what we have gained. What I want instead is to exercise a responsibility under my baptism, rather than under the authority of a sacrament of which I reject the validity. The sacrament of the holy orders appears to me to be misplaced. In the Code of Canon, in canon law, one says that the sacrament of the holy orders bears a divine seal. And I believe it is madness to believe that God places a seal on the ordination of every priest. It is instrumentalizing God to say so, especially in the age of the sexual misconduct of priests. So I think we have to reform the ordained ministry. And many people have difficulty understanding that. A lot of the journalists who interview me, despite having spent an hour with them, ask me again, so do you still want to be a priest? And I respond, no, I do not wish to be a priest. I am baptized, and I wish to exercise a responsibility under my baptism. And that is what Pope Francis wants to do. He says that he wishes not to clericalize or assign women to responsibilities within the clergy. And I say, like him, let us go through the authority of baptism.
Est-ce que je suis claire?
Wait. How long have you been a Catholic? Are you a cradle Catholic? Were you born Catholic, Anne?
I am born in a Catholic family, an open-minded family. But I have met the Christ when I was 30 years old. That's another very important event for me.
From that moment on, I was enchanted by the beauty of the church, a church that has investigated in so many fields of philosophy and theology and human sciences before its time, a church that has understood the beauty of the human soul, and a church that has provided me with its culture and its responses. And I was truly enchanted by the profundity of and the richness of the church's heritage. So I don't believe to have had an attitude of someone who was simply just converted with its radicalness and excessiveness that it is sometimes accompanied with. But rather I was continuously enchanted by the church's beauty.
Because baptism, the baptism of a Christian, you're putting a lot on that space.
You're putting
a lot of responsibility or a sort of announcing of a way of being from being baptized in Christ. Could you talk a little bit more about when you said and you met Christ at 13? What happened there? Because these are very private events that don't get much public airtime.
I speak a little of my conversion in my book that I invite you to have a look at, Pour l'amour de Dieu, d'Alvan Michel. So the question asks itself, when we had a son, he was about 5 or 6 years of age, and I asked myself whether it was important to put him before catechism courses. And I realized then that what I had most precious to give him was something that I did not yet have, which was my faith. And it appeared to me suddenly as a revelation that it was in the transmission that we had things that appeared to us as the greatest. And then I understood that this was the message of Christianity. This conversion, this experience of my conversion prolonged itself. My son was certainly a trigger of my profound conversion. And I believe that all of our conversion corresponds to a deep psychic upheaval. And I think we take note of the vanity of certain things, such as the desire for endless consumption, the desire to appear in a certain way, the endless distractions as were well understood by the writer Pascal. And I have had then the desire to return to my own essence. And I understood then that my essence was this unassailable God who would nonetheless be ever so present. And the message that I have received and that I wish to transmit, because that is my vocation, is to say that we are loved by God. I think we have nothing other than that to say, that we are loved by God and that our responsibility to be human is to show this to our fellow sisters and brothers. That is what I believe is the major responsibility before God.
Alors, I mean, you come from the land of Simone de Beauvoir. You know, for which all us Anglophones, you know, are in slight awe. You know, the breakthrough thinker on women's liberation, really, from the European side of things. So here you have Simone de Beauvoir, and on the other side, the Catholic Church that is saying, women, no way.
Yes, but
yes, but there is the gospel. The gospel that links me both to Simone de Beauvoir and the church. When I was a young lady at 14, 15, 16, I read everything of Simone de Beauvoir. I read everything of Jean-Paul Sartre. I read everything of Albert Camus, because I think that Simone de Beauvoir worked for the liberation of women. And I believe that the God of the Bible believes for the liberation of all human beings. And I think that the gospel is feminist. That's important. The gospel is feminist. Nobody dares say it in church, but in my eyes the gospel is feminist, because Jesus never distinguishes between men and women in their behavior. He welcomes all. He invented human rights with women's rights. He has never excluded women from human rights. He has restored the dignity of women and has opened to them the doors that were previously closed to them. There are multiple examples of that. The adulterous woman, the Syrophoenician woman, Elizabeth the Sterile. There are many, many examples of women who have been liberated by God. When one objects that man has chosen 12 men, I say first that it is dignified, unfit for the Catholic Church to use such an intellectually mediocre argument.
What to do?
Je vous explique pourquoi. Les 12
Let me explain why. The 12 disciples chosen by Jesus were chosen because Patriarch Jacob has 12 sons. He does not call them the happy few or the chosen, or he does not refer to them as per their socio-economic status. He refers to them as all of Israel, which is a very strong symbol. It is the contrary of a selection. Jesus calls for all to follow him. But that, the magisterium, has locked itself in a fundamentalist interpretation, and one that can be considered shameful intellectually. I say it again, 30 or 40 years ago, no pope would have accepted to support
Il y a 30 ou 40
such
ans,
a reading.
aucun pape n'aurait osé soutenir une chose pareille.
This is
Aucun
fundamentalism.
préfet de la congrégation pour la doctrine de la foi n'aurait osé soutenir ça. C'est du fondamentalisme.
How do you think things will change, Anne? I mean, I know that you will believe that you putting yourself forward for this archbishopric, is one of those. It's like a hammer going in on the door. But how do you think things will change?
Alors,
in regards to myself and myself alone, I have never had a response, and therefore I consider myself still an applicant. I was never told why I could not continue to being a candidate, and therefore I will continue to show that I can be an archbishop, albeit even a virtual archbishop. Now, in regards to how things may change at a larger level, you have noticed that a woman was recently appointed in the secretary of the Synod of Bishops, and that is important because she will be, as a religious woman, the first to vote in such a capacity. You have also noticed that the Pope has opened the ministries instituted for women. That is as well, even though for the time being this is only a matter of carrying a book or to perform simple tasks, it nonetheless opens the door to the creation of new ministries that we, men and women, are called to creating. Why not invent a ministry of listening? What prevents us from creating a ministry for or dedicated to listening to others as an act in and of itself, as a competence recognizing the promotion of quality teaching that accompanies the listening of others within the Christian faith. So I believe that the plan of Pope Francis is to ask two communities to open up spaces for new ministries whilst reforming the ordained ministry.
And why do you think that there is this such long resistance to both accepting the potential for male priests to be married and for females to be able to be priests alongside males? There seems to be a total resistance or fear of the female, and that would be great to understand a bit more about.
I am not sure I have understood everything, but I will attempt to respond. I believe it would be good for priests to be married and for women to be able to become priests. However, under the condition that the ordained ministry be profoundly reformed, that the ordained ministry no longer be attached to a divine seal, rather for the ordained ministry be considered to be tied to human decisions. For me, that is a fundamental point, And I do believe that Protestants were right. To say so appears like too big of a statement. However, I dare say that Protestants were right to consider ministries as timely responsibilities that were not tied to a divine seal.
Well, this is like a long reformation.
Yes, of course, that is a very large work that awaits the Church. And I fear that the Church will not have the courage to reform the ordained ministry as such.
Et qui ne le voudra pas. Il y a beaucoup de risques en ce moment dans l'Église.
In terms of secularization, secularization, which France knows has a long history since the French Revolution of secularization. Do you see yourself as a biblical scholar any sources of refreshment for the French Church leading on a Catholic Reformation, just as the German churches led initially on the? Is this really a political thing we're dealing with, or is it fundamental to the Catholic Catechism? How do you view it?
I believe that France, and for the last 30 years, has been or can be qualified as extremely reactionary, perhaps the most reactionary church among other European churches, because we are having to deal with a historic heritage of Charles Maurras, early 20th century right-wing thinker, who puts forth the image of a church as a moral giver that is very detached from the gospel. We have inherited from that current of thought that has been strengthened over the years. So France's church is more closed than the church in Italy, for example, that has a stronger populist support, or that of Spain. So one could say that the church in France is less progressive or less wise than other European churches. So it is true that for several reasons, the church in France has numerous particularities. Now, I fear that there be a united front, a hostile front against modernity, especially in relation to social questions such as those related to gender and homosexual rights, some which may lead to virulent attacks such as those seen in the US. And I'm not sure what else to add to this.
I think what I'd like to know from you, because this is very interesting, the differences between the European churches. You know, because I think for people outside of the denomination, they don't see the fractured different power centers. So thank you for sharing that.
And I would like to add, if I may, that the church in Switzerland, which is very confronted to Protestantism, is perhaps one of the most tonic and outspoken in favor of the promotion of women's rights. The Swiss archbishop hear the grievances of women theologians and women holding positions within the church. And the Swiss are therefore, similarly to Germany, are to be considered on the side of the churches that are in favor of such changes.
To your roots, in a sense, to your values, to the things that really keep you going. As a biblical scholar and as also Christian for many decades now. You've been following Christ in a very conscious way for many years, and learning to be a biblical scholar. What if I was to ask you what is the most important liberation verse in the scriptures for you? If you had, which verse do you go back to and go, that's it?
Le mot le plus important du christianisme, c'est le mot Pâques. C'est le mot Pâques.
The most important word of Christianism, in my eyes, is the word Pâques. Because Pâques means passage, pesa in Hebrew, and this passage is the profound dynamic of human beings, the acceptance of a passage, of a movement. And I believe that Christianism has an intrinsic dynamism that can be considered very rich and fruitful. That dynamism is what can allow Christianism to live tomorrow. And so this is why Pâques is the most important word to me, because that is the liberation. The God of Christianity and Judaism is the God that liberates. It liberates from slavery of Egypt and the slavery of evil. It is very difficult to speak of the liberation of evil by Jesus because the pain and evil continues to stand. However, our faith in the liberation from pain has to be greater than the reality of evil and pain. That is very important, and it is difficult to understand this. My deepest wish would be for Catholic women to understand that they have a long way to go still to liberate themselves in order to be fulfilled and have responsibilities within the Catholic Church. But it is for them to understand that they have competencies, that they are loved by God like men are, and that they are not second-row citizens. That would be my deepest desire and wish for this 8th March.
And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Merci à vous, Kaveh. Merci.
And bon courage.
Bon courage, oui.
How do you say bon courage in English?
Oh, we say all strength.
All strength.
We may say good luck, but this isn't a matter of luck. It's a matter of courage, yes, and resilience and faith, yes, and knowing that you're heading in a direction that God invites us into.
Okay, yes, sure. Bon,
well,
eh bien, très bien.
Very well.
Très bien.